Welcome to the Jordan Warburton Occurrence. This is episode 13, which is absolutely wild to think that I've done 13 episodes and people haven't told me to fuck off yet. So, this is the first episode of like a mini series I sort of decided to do, and it's gonna be about like identity over the years. And this first one like really takes me back to when I lost my sister at 17, and like I didn't realize until recently that I didn't just lose her. I lost who I was with her. So this episode isn't about the grief, it's about the identity. So who was I before it happened? Well, I was just a teenager trying to figure out who I was as well. I still figuring myself out, but I was generally happy, just sort of chill, sort of just want to do my own thing, but not bother everyone at the same time. And I always thought of myself as like a good brother, really protective. Got into many scraps over my younger sister, even my older sister. So, sort of ready to fight to the death anyone who hurt or got in my way with them to make sure they were happy and safe. And I sort of transferred over until being a man now. I'm still that way now. Obviously, being a teenager, nobody's figured their life out yet. You just sort of trying to like understand who you are, where you fit in the world. But I think I was on my way to just becoming like a kind, compassionate, caring, and loving young man. Maybe a little bit of autism as well, but we didn't figure that out until much later. I definitely wasn't a carefree sort of teenager. I didn't have fear when it came to people. I weren't afraid of anyone. And I was reminded of this recently, actually, by one of my friends. I could walk into a room, I could look everyone up and down, and I didn't care how big they were or how hard they thought they were. I did not care. So then, before I lost you down, thought I knew who I was, but realistically, I was still forming of what sort of man I was. So I think this is what made the loss really hard for me because I hadn't really like solidified who I was. I was still figuring myself out, especially at age of 17, where just left school and you know just starting to learn to drive, meeting new friends in college. It was like the before the massive dawn of social media where everyone knows everyone from a friend on Facebook, etc., etc. So let's move on. So I'm gonna focus on the actual loss of my sister now, and I remember it was a Friday evening. This is almost 17 years ago now. It was a Friday evening. Me and my friends had been walking around the local area, just doing a normal Friday night. Got back to my house, put some Family Guy on because I remember lending some DVDs off a friend of mine because this is before streaming. So old I am. And then there was a knock on the door, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird." And it ends up being the police. And they had to like inform me there because my mother weren't there, and they had to inform me, and then they had to take me to my father's house, and then they told my father that she'd passed, and that's when they like all hit me, the like actual seriousness of the situation. I'm watching somebody who never let anyone face him. I watched my father break and go to like attack a wall in his shock, and I remember being so emotionally confused. I felt like I should be crying, but I was just so overwhelmed. I just so shocked, and like I felt sad, but the overwhelming shock had just taken over, and it was really weird because I remember I didn't sleep that night, maybe half hour, but it was just my body was in such shock. It just felt like I was sort of floating through that night, and it was awful. Like I can still remember it vividly, and it just this weird sort of scenario where it just felt like the world was moving around me, but my world had just stopped dead. Like, like nothing could happen apart from the here and now. Face the reality of the world in that way, so I just sort of became a floater. Didn't have like any aspirations, no goals, nothing planned for the life ahead of me. And I just all I could feel, the main feeling outside of grief was the responsibility of letting my sister down, and that was something that stuck with me for 10 years. When I carried blame that wasn't my blame to carry because it was an accident, but I couldn't let that go. I really, really struggled to let that go. I just felt like I failed my little sister, and I do get glimpses of it sometimes, and it catches me off guard. But I know nothing, nothing I could have done would have changed it, which sort of put me into man mode really early. I didn't want to enjoy. I just wanted to be and like have responsibility, but at the same time wasn't ready to take that up. So this sort of made me avoid like feeling anything apart from what I guess was guilt and shame and grief. Those are the three main feelings I had from the age of 17 into my early 20s. So I guess I didn't really process what happened. I just survived it. And I didn't heal. I was just functional. I was going to college, showing up to work, see my friends, but it wasn't really me. Now I'm gonna sort of subtitle this part as the mask. It was pretending I was okay, being a functioning young man in society, going to college and working a part time job, spending time with friends, seeing family often, And like I said, I carried guilt, shame, and grief, and that's all I really felt. And I carried it probably until the age of 23, 24. So it's almost 7 years where I sort of carried this mask. And, people always thought I was fine, apart from the people who really knew what I was like, how deep I can be. And my mother always says to me, "You're as deep as the ocean," and that worries me. Yeah, and with my mother being worried about me, it sort of reflected to other people close to me. But I come from a time where men were just expected to like shrug their shoulders and just get on with it, and it was hard because I always found it difficult to talk about my feelings anyway. But it was even harder to like not be able to open up, or feel like I couldn't open up. And I'm very lucky I did have people around me I could open up to, but it was only when it got too much for me. That's where this silent pressure to be strong comes from. Um, it gets built in from a young age.